Can start, I think. Okay. Hello and welcome. I welcome you all to this first meetup event about NEXCHAIN after the summer break. My name is Yasmin Aslampour and I'm a trainee in the Marketing and Communication Department in Nexplore, Germany. And thus I also support Filipp Valovich and the NEXCHAIN team concerning marketing affairs. Today we will have 3 referents. The first one will be Filipp Valovich. He is a senior product lead at Nexplore and responsible for all blockchain topics in the company. Before joining Nexplore, he worked in science and in consulting with major focus on distributed ledger technologies. And Filipp also holds a PhD in mathematics and in cryptography. Then we are going to listen to Arne Rutjes. He has a long-term record at IBM and is now leading IBM's blockchain practice in Groningen. Long time he was the main architect behind Nexplore's blockchain technology, blockchain infrastructure, and he holds a degree in law and a variety of IT qualifications. And lastly, we will listen to John Pater. He is the tech lead for all blockchain developments in Nexplore. Before Nexplore, he was successfully founding and leading several tech startups, and John holds various degrees in software engineering and in blockchain. Before we start, I would like to mention that if you have any questions at any point, just ask them via Mentimeter. You will find the link in the YouTube description, or you can also ask your questions directly via the YouTube live chat. Yeah, these are the 2 options you can use to ask the questions. We will take some time between the single talks and also after the last talk to answer these questions. And now I'm going to give the mic to Filipp Valovich, who will talk about the use cases for blockchain in heavy industries.
Introduction, and also from my side, welcome everybody to this meetup. So we are pleased to have you all here and to present to you our recent developments regarding blockchain technologies in the construction industry. So before we dive in, I wanted just to give a short introduction about what is actually Nexplore. So Nexplore is a full subsidiary of Hochtief, which is a major construction company and enterprise in Europe. Here in the background, for example, you see the Elbphilharmonie, the landmark of the beautiful city of Hamburg, which was built and managed by Hochtief. And yeah, Nexplore is basically responsible for all the digital strategies and developments for Hochtief. We have been founded about 4 years ago, and we are here to revolutionize the digital landscape of the construction industry. Not last but not least, blockchain is of course one of the major technologies we want to use here. We want to build up construction processes and processes of the heavy industries in general for the blockchain. We want to see projects like these ones in the Elbphilharmonie to be fully covered on the blockchain, and the process should be fully covered on the blockchain in future. That's where we are heading for, and that's what our target here is, specifically for our blockchain department. So yeah, as I said, Nexplore drives the innovations. It drives the innovations in the construction industry. It creates digital products. We want to solve the most current problems in the digital world for the construction processes. We have a variety of use cases already covered and still covering. Here is, for example, an excerpt from our product suite at Nexplore, which goes from management of subcontractors, for example, to supply chain and deliveries management on the construction sites, as well as IoT sensor data processing or drone service processing, as well as analyzing contracts with AI and other major technologies of the current times. So we are doing real innovations here. I think we are on the forefront regarding digital technologies in the construction and heavy industries in general. So coming back to the blockchain topics and what are we actually doing and why we are doing blockchain developments in Nexplore. We see a lot of problems on construction sites, be it on the daily work, but also in the management of construction sites, for example, regarding misalignments of data when it comes to collaborative projects, where different companies, as it is typical of construction, work together in order to build up new buildings, new infrastructures, as is the case for Hochtief. From those kind of misalignments, of course, the quality of the collaboration suffers. Eventually, undue delays and disputes happen between those contractors, and eventually this leads to unforeseeable costs. There is even a figure that was researched by the World Economic Forum, an estimate that around $870 billion are spent as global direct costs annually for such disputes. And we see that a DLT or distributed ledger infrastructure can help with those kind of problems. Of course, it cannot help on its own. It requires business applications to run on it. But as an infrastructure, it can provide a lot already. And there is nothing that we see yet for industrial applications, especially when it comes to construction and heavy industries. So we want to start building up new infrastructure focusing on the heavy industries. And I will not deep dive too much into what is actually blockchain and how it works, but basically we imagine a solution which is consists of a permission blockchain infrastructure, which is basically generic for all kind of industrial applications. So it is free of business rules. It facilitates seamless integration of business-specific applications or dApps, which are bound to the specific use cases of the industries and the users. And of course, this permission network is already powered by an ecosystem of companies that is already in place. You can imagine with a major construction company like Hochtief, there is already an ecosystem behind with lots of partners, clients, and subsidiaries. And this way, we want to streamline the collaboration between those contract partners. So NEXCHAIN, as a product of Nexplore, is providing the blockchain infrastructure layer for these kind of use cases. On top of NEXCHAIN as an infrastructure, of course, the users on the construction sites, they have to use concrete decentralized applications, which are business tied. We see different categories of applications that can be used on NEXCHAIN. For example, applications that cover specific industries like construction, manufacturing, mobility, everything that is covered in the heavy industry sector. Then we see the category of cross-industrial applications. For example, supply chain or legal things are cross-industry covering. And we also want to cover applications from the regulatory sector, so governmental use cases. And I will come back to the specific use cases that one can imagine a little bit later in this talk. Well, so from a mission or a vision perspective, what we are currently heading for from the short-term perspective, if you look at the right-hand side here, we want to cover existing use cases that already are there in the HOCHTIEF and ACS group. Use cases that people from the business have encountered, which are already being transferred into business-specific applications built by Nexplore, but also built by other companies. And we are focused on covering those things which are at the moment also bound to the construction sector. In the midterm, we want to set up a platform which will be connecting users, node providers in the blockchain network, as well as dApp providers, and thereby reach a global network of people and companies. Last but not least, from the long-term perspective, we want to be something like the internet for the industry. We want to be the world's leading industrial communication network. We want that all communications for industrial use cases go through NEXCHAIN, that this product becomes the real internet for the industry. I just want to give you a little overview of how the whole process of NEXCHAIN works, what does it consist of, and what do you do as a user if you want to use NEXCHAIN. So basically, NEXCHAIN works as a sort of platform where infrastructure providers and dApp providers build up the supply side, and the users build up the demand side, and can use those infrastructure or node providers, as well as the dApps that the providers of dApps give to the network. So how does the process for the users work? Basically, different companies which agree to work collaboratively on a use case, on a project, be it on a construction site or anything similar, they come together and subscribe to NEXCHAIN nodes, which they can use. They can either use their own node or they use the node of their trust, for example, such that they can send data and transactions to the blockchain network. And then they set up an own isolated channel with its own blockchain, which is isolated from other channels of the same kind, such that data of this project is also isolated. And then the users also subscribe to business-specific dApps, which they want to use for their project. And as I said, I will come a little bit later to what those dApps could be. Then that's the subscription or the setup phase. And in the second phase, basically, the users are starting their project. They are collaborating with each other. And in that regard, they also start transacting on the blockchain. They are sending data assets in form of transactions to the blockchain and share them among each other. Then, of course, how do they use the blockchain, or what is the purpose of the blockchain? Eventually, we all know the features the blockchain provides. The users receive all the trust and transparency of the data they have stored in the blockchain. They can provide some sort of non-repudiation, such that eventually, if there comes some dispute between each other, they can provide as a proof the records in the blockchain and the processes that were built in the blockchain as a proof that the truth is on their side, for example. And this is the way eventually how disputes, how real disputes on the courts will be eliminated, and thereby costs will be saved. So just to give you some overview how the product NEXCHAIN differentiates maybe from other blockchain infrastructures that you might hear of and you might think of at the moment. NEXCHAIN is a permissioned blockchain infrastructure. It's working for an existing and growing ecosystem and business network of companies. The infrastructure is generic, so there are no business rules coded in there. It can serve really all kind of infrastructures and use cases, scenarios in the heavy industries. So we have also very convenient and automatic on-chain governance process, which means that questions like who can join this network, who should be thrown out of this network, which application should be installed on the network, and many others. They can be, these questions can be solved and answered and directly automatically implemented via the blockchain. And for this, we have also nice user interfaces, and it's really convenient for the blockchain node and infrastructure operators. As I have already noticed, there is a flexible way of how you can share data on the blockchain. So you have isolated channels, which means that a project that sets up its own channel does not share the data with the projects of other channels. So in this regard, you have, as a project collaborator, really an isolation of data, and you don't share this data with users and network participants that you may not want to share this data with. And we have even more really interesting data sharing and privacy mechanisms in there. So eventually the users, the end users of the dApps, they enjoy the benefits of the blockchain, all what it comes with, but they don't have to cope with the infrastructural topics. They can just use it right from the beginning and without headaches in mind. And this way, we are distinguishing a lot from other infrastructural products for blockchain. We can also allow the user to use nodes that they trust, which is in contrast to nodes that they have to bring with them. So they have the two options. They can either create or set up an own node in the NEXCHAIN network, or they can use and subscribe to another node that is already running and that they trust. So companies which maybe do not want to afford the operation and setup of a node, they can just use another one. Last but not least, our interfaces are really simple. We have different interfaces for the development of applications and onboarding those applications, as well as commercializing these applications to NEXCHAIN. So the dApp developer experience is extremely high on NEXCHAIN. So now I come to the overview of some interesting use cases that can be built up on NEXCHAIN. So these are use cases for dApps that can be developed and onboarded on NEXCHAIN. Of course, this is just an excerpt and it's not limited to this. And these are just examples. For example, in the category of specific industries, we can imagine different kind of applications. For example, in the construction sector, we can imagine the tracking of a life cycle in a building information model for real estate, from planning to building up the building and finishing with the selling of the building, for example. And there are many more. For example, in the manufacturing, we can imagine an application that tracks the quality of components in the manufacturing value chain, which is, of course, also a highly collaborative use case where different companies are working together on components for some manufacturing process. In the cross-industrial part, there are different kind of applications one can imagine. For example, smart cities is a great example where many industries come together working on a common use case and working on different parts of these use cases from different industries. And there we can imagine different applications for the execution of a smart city, from planning to building it up. and managing the processes when it's already used. In the industry regulatory part, a big topic nowadays, of course, is everything around ESG, environment, social, governmental. And we imagine applications all around the trading of CO2 emission rights or CO2 footprinting via blockchain, which can be attested by the governmental bodies. And that way you have a real proof, regulatory compliant, that your CO2 footprint is acceptable, for example. Of course, there are different other use cases from there: tender management processes, procurement processes, tax deduction. So everything what is collaborative use cases and serves the heavy industries, that's something we can imagine to have dApps built for and integrated on NEXCHAIN. As I said, we have really nice integration tools, how to create such dApps and integrate them on NEXCHAIN. And further on this meetup, John Peter will explain how to do this completely. I would like to come to some small case study for example application that we have integrated on NEXCHAIN. This application was developed by Nexplore. It is called Nexplore Concrete. It's a software application for the documentation of the concrete supply on construction sites. And this is, of course, a highly collaborative use case where suppliers have to bring concrete to the construction site where the concrete has to be used further on. And the application basically provides the possibility for the users to create orders of concrete, to create deliveries of concrete, and to create the test data of the concrete when it arrives. So all these things, orders of concrete, deliveries of concrete, and tests of concrete, come with data, of course, and this data is basically processed, documented through this application. And now, upon this integration of this application with NEXCHAIN on the blockchain, the data of orders, deliveries, and tests is going to be also processed on the blockchain. And this way, basically, the users of the application reach a consensus. It means a common view on the data that was recorded for orders, for deliveries, for the tests of concrete. And then, for example, when the contractor who has ordered some concrete and received this concrete and tested it successfully and affirmed that the test was good and the concrete quality is good, cannot refute and deny in the future that he has not done so. So this data will be recorded on the blockchain, and the supplier who brought the concrete to the construction site can just prove that the contractor who has ordered the concrete has actually attested that the data is correct, that the concrete is good and can be used. And this way, the contractor cannot deny anymore that he has not done so. And that's where blockchain really brings up its force, its power, and that's why we all love blockchain. I'm coming to the product roadmap for NEXCHAIN. I am highlighting a little bit our current features as well as some upcoming features for the next phases. So we have an agnostic infrastructure, which is not bound to business rules, as I already said. We power isolated business channels, which means that projects do not need to share the data with other projects, and they can use just their own isolated channel. We provide a tenant system, which means that users that want to use NEXCHAIN don't have to use their own node. They can go as a tenant and subscribe to other nodes that they trust, and the node providers that also offer their node services. We have an on-chain governance process covering questions like who can join the network, who should not be in the network anymore, which kind of application should we install here, and so on. And these questions are answered and managed all over the blockchain among all network participants. Our infrastructure is easy to set up. The only requirement you need for hosting a node is to use Kubernetes. And we provide very lean and nice to use application development framework, which John Peter will explain later. For the future, we have also big plans. We want to enable to bring your own node in any infrastructure you like. So you can just set up your own node in anywhere you want with a few clicks and just be connected with the overall NEXCHAIN network. We are going to create and set up a marketplace where node providers and dApp providers can offer their services and where users can subscribe to those. We want to enable the wallet management such that every user can have just his own or her own wallet on NEXCHAIN with their own identity. And we want to provide flexible custody mechanisms for these wallets, such that you can even have any security level that you would like for managing your secret data. We want to come to a status where data that is recorded on NEXCHAIN is regulatory enforceable, which means that you can provide data recorded on the blockchain really as a proof of the truth, where the blockchain is really considered as a single source of truth, which stands in front of court. We have also a concept of the integration for self-sovereign identity or verifiable credentials, where we want to decentrally manage identities on the blockchain and via the blockchain, such that users of NEXCHAIN can really leverage what is there already for self-sovereign identity, things that will be enforced EU-wide anyway. And we want to be on the forefront of these developments here, integrate solutions for SSI into our product. For this, we want to develop a mobile app and use this mobile app not only for identifying, but also for other use cases in NEXCHAIN. We want also to enable the communications of dApps between each other. Of course, this is already possible just by custom development of smart contracts, but we want to even enable this in a more smarter and easier fashion, such that dApp developers have a really nice developer experience on cross-dApp communication developments. Where, for example, you could imagine that supply chain dApp can source its data into a billing dApp directly via blockchain. That could be a use case, for example. Also, we want to introduce infrastructure interoperability, where we can support different kind of blockchain frameworks for different use cases. For example, we could imagine to use some of the established open blockchains or permissionless blockchains for payments and integrate this into NEXCHAIN. Also, we want to come with a NEXCHAIN token. That's something for the future, where we want to enable make all payments in the NEXCHAIN ecosystem through NEXCHAIN itself and powered by a dedicated token. We have a couple of steps that are going to be made in the next couple of weeks and months. We are about to launch our testnet and thereby our mainnet. That's something we are foreseeing in the upcoming weeks. And we are really looking forward to this. We are coming then with pilots in Germany and the USA, which will be used on real life projects. And this is our great goal to achieve in the upcoming near future. So stay tuned for these developments. Then we are going to open our product to the integration of dApps for other dApp providers. So at the moment, NEXCHAIN is the only, Nexplore is the only dApp provider that is providing its dApps on NEXCHAIN. And we also want to enable other parties, other software providers to bring their applications to NEXCHAIN, to offer their applications to the NEXCHAIN network and ecosystem, and to let users subscribe to those applications. Thereby, it's of course possible to either develop completely new applications, but also to onboard existing, so to say, legacy applications on NEXCHAIN and turn them into dApps. For this, we want to release a marketplace, which is upcoming soon. We are going to onboard more dApps from in the next year and leverage even more use cases by this. And for this, we are going also to pilot in the APAC. We want to be live there quite soon then. And eventually, our network will be centralized. Okay, I want to summarize a little bit what we have seen. So we are a company providing digital products for the construction and heavy industries. NEXCHAIN is the blockchain product of Nexplore, providing the infrastructure for dApps and providing means of resolving possible disputes, potential costs and delays that come up from those disputes. And that's what we are building. We are backed by ACS and Hochtief, global leaders in the construction industry, coming with real networks behind that are going to use NEXCHAIN. By this, we have, of course, real insights in the industry. This is setting us apart and giving us advantage on how we can build up our product and also our dApps. And that's our big advantage here. In contrast to other solutions that you have seen and might think of right now, we are not building a consortium here. So we are not creating some group of companies coming together that want to collaborate on a use case and for this agree to set up a blockchain infrastructure. No, that's not the case. So what we are doing is we are setting up technical infrastructure on our own. We define the first initial network rules, and we are going out to the market with this product. And our rules are so generic that they can serve the whole industries. They can serve and provide an infrastructure for any kind of business application. And that's how we accelerate our time to market here. We are focusing on the heavy industries, just to distinguish from finance. Of course, in finance, you see already a lot of different infrastructure in blockchain, and we are not going to compete with this. We are really focused on heavy industries and leveraging the potential here. So what we want is to be really the global leader for blockchain in the industrial market. Okay, so that's the end of my talk. If there are any questions so far, I think, Yasmin, you can just post them or just ask them. Right?
Well, actually, there is a question for you, Filipp, and it is the technology going to be based on non-fungible tokens?
Yes, at the moment, there is no plan for non-fungible tokens. So we have no non-fungible tokens not implemented in our product or not in the roadmap. However, I know there are already requests from the business sides, from different parties, that non-fungible tokens would be interesting. At least we are interpreting those requests and requirements as non-fungible tokens requirements, which means that we can think of an implementation of non-fungible tokens and use them on the NEXCHAIN somewhere on the roadmap, but it's not planned at the moment.
Okay, and there is another question. Is that token going to be connected to an asset or stable coin?
Well, this is not so decided yet. The token is something that we usually plan far ahead. We will connect, or we will use the token as means of payments in NEXCHAIN ecosystem, especially on the marketplace that we are going to create.
Okay, thank you, Filipp, for your talk. There are no other questions, and I think we can go on with Arne.
Hi all, I'm Arne. Arne Rutjes. I'm a blockchain architect at IBM, and I've been working in blockchain for about 7 years now. And I was also the architect for NEXCHAIN in 2020 and 2021. It's been a real pleasure working with the team, and partly that's because of the uniqueness of NEXCHAIN. What, in my mind, really sets it apart compared to all the other things I've worked on is that it's really ambitious. NEXCHAIN is a general purpose blockchain for the entire industry. So as Filipp already mentioned, often a consortium comes together and tries to solve a single use case with a blockchain solution. So for instance, to offer specific banking services to small to medium enterprises. Or to provide more transparency in the logistics supply chain of a specific industry. And what's really cool about NEXCHAIN is that it's basically just providing the infrastructure to build all these use cases on top of it. And what's so powerful about it is that the ACS group is one of the biggest construction or industry groups in the world. So you already have so many different companies under this one roof, but they still have their own business. And that makes a blockchain a really interesting solution. So what we basically do with NEXCHAIN is to provide the infrastructure to create these decentralized applications. And I want you to really think about, what do you actually require from infrastructure? What is it that you need from a bridge or a road? Some of the things that are also built by the users of NEXCHAIN. I'll get back to that. But in the next 5 or 10 minutes, I'll talk a little bit about the decisions that we had to make, some of the challenges that we encountered while designing and building NEXCHAIN. So one of the first questions is always, when you create a new blockchain solution, what kind of protocol do you use, and where are you on the scale of permissioned versus completely open? So, as Filipp said, NEXCHAIN is built on a permissioned network, and really started by these companies that were mentioned before. And so, okay, for who's not entirely familiar with the distinction, a permissioned blockchain means that the participants of the network have control over who else can join the network. So the whole governance process involves identifying yourself and then being added to the network. This is the most common.
Arne, you're muted again, man.
Oh, it wasn't me. I hope not for long.
Not long, not long.
Great. So enterprise doesn't like risk, and the heavy industry for sure is to a large extent built around managing risk. So when considering a blockchain solution there, you should really think about things like, are we dependent on other parties? Especially when we made the choice, or when the choice was made in 2019, as a business, you couldn't really rely on a public network like Ethereum because of the unpredictability of transaction costs, for instance, or the lack of finality. So when a transaction is created, you still have to wait for about 10 minutes until you know if a transaction is final. So there are all these little things that together made us choose for a permissioned blockchain. Another part is, by the way, the scalability and the throughput of transactions. If you want to be the infrastructure of an industry, then you need to be able to handle a large amount of transactions per second. So all of this together made us choose for permissions, and then one of the best choices there is Hyperledger Fabric, an open source technology being developed in the Hyperledger project, which is actually part of the Linux Foundation, and it provides us everything we need to build on top of. So, taking a step back, who are actually NEXCHAIN's users and what do they need? So our end users are, of course, we're in IT, so we serve our end users. All IT does is support the business. So it's all about the people on the project. It's the project managers, it's the people on the construction site, but also the truck drivers, anyone involved in this whole chain. But then again, as a product team, we weren't really involved in that. But we were involved with application developers, also called the dApp providers by Filipp before. So we had many interviews with other developers within Nexplore who were working on Concrete or on the Minerva application about what would you want from a blockchain infrastructure. Finally, we have the IT administrators. Let's not forget about them. Anyone who has worked with blockchain in production knows that it's not easy to manage a blockchain node, security-wise and all the operations around it. It takes a very specific skill set. And the question we asked ourselves and our network was, how can we make the life easier of them? So what do they all need? Well, the end users just want to do their job. They don't even want to know about our IT infrastructure. And if there's a blockchain under there, definitely not. What do you want from a bridge? You just want it to work. You want it to be reliable, and you just want to get from A to B. So that's one thing that we really took into account. Then our application developers, well, they had similar requests. They want reliability. They want to be able to use NEXCHAIN without wondering if it works. They just want reliability. They want to get answers quick, and it has to be stable. And finally, the operators. Well, I mentioned the skills are hard to find, so we also needed a way to make their lives as easy as possible. And from all these things, I think John's presentation will show how we actually try to do that, and hopefully you'll agree with us that we make it really smooth to transition into using blockchain, even if you come from a different background. But basically, what it all ended up with is everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. This is a quote of Albert Einstein, but it's really what we took into account while building this solution. When I started on the project, there was already a solution that was extremely clever. You could create a smart contract that could subscribe to to events created by another smart contract. And in that way, you could have this whole cascading effect of when you create an order, then it could already trigger some smart contracts for the logistics provider. And it was great if it worked, when it worked. But what we heard from our dApp developers was they found it too hard to understand. It was getting too complex too quickly. As a developer, you have to deal with more and more different systems and complexity already. You're expected to do a bit of DevOps with it. You have to know how to write unit tests. And you want to keep your life as simple as possible. So that's what we invested in. And we created a few sample dApps and some helpers that really turned it all into something much more manageable. And again, John is going to show you how. And it turned out also for ourselves. Blockchain is a complex beast. Deploying it to Kubernetes in a secure way makes it even more complex. So one big lesson learned for us was invest time in reducing complexity. Even if it's painful, even if you have to change previous decisions, anything you can do to do that is probably worth it. So, to conclude, simplicity really is king. Even if it means kill your darlings, you might have an incredibly clever solution. If it doesn't serve your users, kill it. And finally, NEXCHAIN is infrastructure. So just like a bridge or a road, we just want to be there. We want to be reliable. And we want you to forget about us. If everything works, if the bridge is fine, you don't even notice it's there, but it does get you from A to B. And NEXCHAIN wants to be so simple and pure that you'll have the same experience. And I don't know if there are any questions, but I'm happy to take them. But otherwise, John will show you how we all did it.
Well, there are no questions right now.
Okay, then I will take over now.
Okay, then go on.
Okay, guys, so thank you all for attending. And yeah, I hope you still have energy to be with me for still, let's say, one more half an hour after those great presentations from Arne and Filipp. So today I want to speak to you guys about, what does it take to actually turn a legacy software application into what we call a decentralized application with NEXCHAIN. But first things first. So what is a decentralized application and how it differs from traditional software applications? Okay, let's go back to basics. So yeah, what is a dApp? What's the definition of what we call a dApp? Well, basically, a decentralized application is an application where the code is running in a decentralized peer-to-peer network. So basically, you have some backend code, which instead of running in a single machine, even if that single machine has multiple, it's scaled to multiple instances. In a decentralized application, you have a network of nodes where the application is going to be running in any of those nodes. Okay. Also, decentralized applications have another distinct faculty, which is actually being able to use a distributed ledger. So basically, all the nodes have access to, let's say, some data that is actually shared between all the nodes. Okay, and they all have a copy of the same data in each node. Decentralized applications, probably you are familiar with this term, are implemented through what we call smart contracts. In NEXCHAIN, we follow the Hyperledger Fabric standard, which is actually calling them chain codes, which in turn is the same thing. And also, this is most important, is that whenever a piece of that backend code or smart contract is executed, it's actually executed in not in one single node that gives you a result, but it's actually endorsed by multiple nodes in the network, which ensures different things. But the main thing that it will ensure is that all the nodes that are running the same code are basically providing the same outputs, given the same inputs. Okay. So the application is deterministic. You cannot have different results from a code that is executed in one node and the same code or function that will be executed in another node. All nodes are going to generate the same output. And actually, before we get to the finality of a transaction that is being executed in the blockchain, multiple nodes will verify that the result is the same. If that doesn't happen, then basically the application breaks. Another interesting topic to touch here is identity. So basically, decentralized application is normally backed by a public key infrastructure, which means that any participant calling a function is being identified through a digital identity with a certificate, okay, with a public key, which basically brings forward the idea of non-repudiation and authority of things happening in that backend, okay? Security is another important part, especially for the NEXCHAIN decentralized applications, where you can enable basically different levels of security using access control lists. And also, if we are talking about NEXCHAIN specifically, we also enable privacy, either through creating different channels for different business applications or projects, or through enabling privacies through what we call private data collections, which means that a node doesn't need to share specifically all the data it has with the rest of the nodes to have some proof that the data that it's holding is true, but actually is what we call a zero key, zero knowledge proof network. So we have this implemented, and this is an extension of Hyperledger Fabric through private data collections. Okay, so these are the, let's say, features of a decentralized application. But now let's see what are the architectural differences between a traditional application and a NEXCHAIN decentralized application. So this is a really simplified, I know, it's a 1,000 feet overview of what a traditional application architecture would look like. So on the left-hand side, we have the user, which is interacting with a front end, and that's quote unquote, because there's multiple types of architectures. I know, I just brought this to the most simple idea I could. The front end is speaking with the back end, and the back end is speaking or is interacting with some kind of data. But yeah, in this traditional infrastructure, what we have is that most probably the back end, at least, and the data is owned by a single authority. So if you're executing an application from Google, basically Google is going to be the owner of the backends and the source code of those backends, and the data that is being stored is basically owned by them, or yeah, depending on the contract. But what we mean is that yeah, the infrastructure is completely bound, or the ownership of the infrastructure is bound to a single organization. Okay, that's simple enough. Now let's see what a decentralized application architecture would look like. So on the right-hand side, you have a pictogram that would be depicting a network of nodes where all the nodes have the same authority. So there's no master node that is able to control any other node. All the nodes share exactly the same backends, share the data, and they agree on a consensus, which is the basics of a blockchain network. And basically the infrastructure, and this is the most important part, is shared by any contributor to that network. Okay, so if 2 organizations or 3 organizations are providing, each of them are providing one node, None of them are the true owners of the network, but actually the three organizations are the owners of the whole network, which actually means that the data is distributed between them. Each of the nodes has a copy of the data that they are using within the application. They also have a copy of the source code, or the code at least, that is being executed. They know that these three organizations know that one single organization cannot be executing a version of the source code which is different to theirs, because the endorsement mechanisms are there. So basically, it's a really trustworthy network based on a non-trustable scenario, let's say. So we don't trust each other, but we trust that our infrastructure is shared to the point where we trust in the technology that is backing the infrastructure, where we are all for which we are all owners of. Okay. So if you go to the left-hand side of the picture, what we can see here is obviously the user, which is interacting with a business application. And this business application, which can be completely decentralized. So there's multiple different architectures that we could look at in the business application. But basically, the business application, there's going to be a point where certain interactions will be published to the blockchain. How does the business application do this? And these were all the simplicity that Arne was mentioning before, and what we strive to provide in a product. The business application is basically interacting with the NEXCHAIN network through an API that is residing in its own node. So the organization uses the business application, and the business application uses the node of the same organization, which has an API that enables the user to be identified with a certificate, so a digital identity. And basically, the API is going to be interacting with the blockchain. So this API is key in our product, and it's the part where we make things simple to the point where if you know how to use an API, then you know how to interact with the blockchain. This is not the normal case with other blockchain applications, where you have to understand a lot of things of what's happening behind the scenes, and actually go down to the point where you understand lots of details. But in this case, the only thing you care about is having an infrastructure, which is really simple to set up. If you even have difficulty setting up that infrastructure of your single own node, then you can always be a tenant to a node owner. So that's even things made even simpler. And then as long as you know how to use a REST API, you can create and generate transactions in blockchain, interacting with that those smart contracts or chain codes that are distributed between the nodes of the network. So moving on forward, and going, making a little bit of a recap on the benefits of using decentralized application. Let's see, what are those? Okay, so where does a decentralized application make sense in the first place, right? I mean, it's true that if you have let's say, a single infrastructure that belongs to a single authority, probably you won't be having to deal with a lot of, let's say, headaches that you would have to deal with by using a blockchain. So there must be a true use case, right, where a blockchain makes sense and a decentralized application makes sense. And the vision that we have is that really applications that involve the interaction between multiple organizations, and where the trust is not given for granted from the beginning, then it makes sense that they execute their, let's say, interactions between them through a decentralized application in a distributed ledger technology. So there's even more upsides. If you do this, you will have things like zero downtime. So basically, you are not interacting with a single node, even if the infrastructure behind the, let's say, the infrastructure owned by a known authority is super resilient. You could always be bound to zero downtimes. In the case of a decentralized application and a blockchain network, the infrastructure is backed by a lot of different nodes. which enables zero downtimes. Also, computing is made trustless. So basically, we trust that the other party is executing a piece of code, which is exactly the same one that my interactions with the application is going to be executing. So it's a completely, let's say, trustworthy ecosystem based on non-trust. Then we also have another part which is interesting for computing, and it's the automation of processes. So basically, you could plan on conditions where when a certain thing happens, then something is executed, and this will be the same for all organizations. So again, everybody's using the same, let's say, rules for their application. Data integrity is also one of the main features or benefits of using a decentralized application. Data is shared in this distributed ledger between all the nodes, and basically you can trust that the data is going to be integral all the time, because if it fails in one node, then basically there's going to be a copy of the data in another node. And furthermore, as the blockchain has specific features with regards to how the data structure is being made, you can have for sure that the data is immutable. So basically, immutability is another core concept of what data integrity means for a blockchain. Obviously, if we go down to the idea of NEXCHAIN, we have even more, let's say, benefits, which is ease of use. So just using APIs, you can use your own smart contracts. We support multiple languages. This, I think there was a question around this in Multimeter, but we support Go, TypeScript, and Java for your chain codes. We provide tools for developers. So apart from providing infrastructure and really tools to have an easier way to set up a node, we also provide tools for developers such that they can develop their chain codes even faster. We also have network governance in place, which is very important. So basically, this is a public infrastructure blockchain, but the truth is that the public part, the private part, is a private infrastructure where anybody can participate. So it does have the means of a publicly available blockchain, but you always have to go through governance mechanisms. So if an organization wants to participate, there wouldn't be, let's say, a sole owner of the network that would be able to ban this new organization from participating with its own node in the network. But actually, you have a lot of governance mechanisms by which the organizations that already belong to the network can decide between them if this new organization is going to participate. And all these mechanisms are already in place for anybody using NEXCHAIN. And last but not least, there's some code already available. So basically, we do provide a certain amount of smart contracts which are ready to use. And I think this is another great difference between NEXCHAIN and other blockchain infrastructures. We provide source code for smart contracts that actually works in our network. It has been audited. We know it works, and it's available for use. Okay, so moving forward, how could we convert a traditional application into a NEXCHAIN decentralized application? And here we have several approaches. Okay, one approach would be that you rewrite your whole application. And we understand, that's possible. So you could directly say, okay, I have a backend that is doing whatever, is solving whatever business use case. Well, I could replicate all the features I do have in my own application to do it with smart contracts. This is a completely valid idea that you could do. But we understand that lots of legacy applications that would like to benefit from the usage of a blockchain and NEXCHAIN in particular won't want to develop again their whole, let's say, source code. So we came up with the idea of a hybrid approach. And the hybrid approach would be that, okay, you may have, and it's the picture that we are showing in the right-hand side, you can have the same users that you use, the same application that you have already developed. You could develop a new, let's say, layer into your application, which is a synchronization layer. And as we said, the true use case of the blockchain is you want to register transactions that involve multiple organizations. So whenever you want to have an interaction between two organizations, probably that part of the application is the one you want to take to the blockchain. If the action only involves one organization and it's really something isolated from the rest, where nobody else would care around what you are doing as an organization, then probably that part, yeah, you can save it and just keep it in the, let's say, normal application. But when you are interacting with multiple organizations, so for example, somebody has to confirm an order has been received, there's an interaction between two organizations, and that data can be synced to the blockchain. So the idea here is basically to have the network running and to have this sync layer that reads the data generated by the application and sends it to the blockchain. Then the user can have a confirmation whenever any specific action he or she has done has been committed to the blockchain. So now whatever you have done is now committed to the blockchain, and there's a transaction on a block with a hash that provides feasibility that the action has been recorded in the blockchain. This would be one of the ideas that we would bring up to traditional app developers that want to use a blockchain but still don't want to completely move into, let's say, the decentralized idea. There could be hybrid approaches. So this is not something that you have to go all in. You can move inside the idea of the blockchain and the true benefits of using a blockchain, going slowly but surely in that direction. And yeah, as we said, NEXCHAIN includes a set of smart, off-the-shelf smart contracts that any application can use for faster decentralized application adoption. So basically, it's source code that is ready to be used. It has been audited. It has been tested thoroughly by our own team, and we know it works. So yeah, for any legacy developer that wants to explore the idea of having certain parts of the application brought to blockchain, we think that these smart contracts that we have are going to really make it really fast for them to convert their legacy application to a decentralized application. And that was all, Jasmine. I don't know if there's any questions I can answer.
Well, there is a question. I don't know if it's for you or for everyone, but it says, are smart contracts supported in NEXCHAIN? And if yes, what language is used for development? Yeah.
So as I said, smart contracts are an integral part of NEXCHAIN. We call them chain codes, but in essence, it's the same thing as a smart contract. And we support Golang, TypeScript, and Java for those smart contracts. So it's even multilingual. And they're really easy to develop. So 100% supported.
Okay.
So if there's no further questions, but if something arrives at your minds at any moment, you want more information, you can reach me out at john.pater@nexplore.com. And I'll be happy to answer, or obviously you can visit our web pages or even visit our offices. So thanks for your time. And back to you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Thank you. If there are no further questions here, I think if you don't want to say anything else, Filipp or Arne, we can stop it now.
Well, nothing from my side. Just thank you everybody for having been here, for watching our meetup. Stay tuned for the next developments and bigger news in the future. And we will be back quite soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.